So, I want to start by asking you, the listener, a deeply personal question.
Oh, we are diving right in today.
Yeah, no warming up. We're just going for it. So think about this. What does it actually mean to be homesick?
That is a really heavy question when you actually pause to think about it.
Right. Because when you feel that very specific, very sharp ache in your chest, what is it you are actually missing? I mean, really think about it for a second.
Most people would just say they miss their house.
Exactly. Is it a physical house you left behind? Is it like the layout of a kitchen or the way the light came through a specific window?
Or maybe a specific group of people.
Yeah, a person or a family. Or, and you have to be really honest with yourself here, is it maybe an earlier, much simpler version of yourself?
It's one of those universal human experiences that we rarely pause to deconstruct it.
We just accept the feeling and let it hurt.
Right. And our working definition of homesickness usually assumes two very specific things. First, it assumes that home is this static entity that exists somewhere in the past.
Okay, and the second assumption.
The second is that distance is the root cause of the pain, the literal miles between you and that geographical coordinate, or even the metaphorical years between now and then.
So the assumption is that if you could just collapse that distance, the pain would vanish entirely.
Exactly. We think, if I could just buy a plane ticket and go back, this hollow feeling would stop.
Or if I could just call that person and hear their voice again, everything would be fine. But today, we are going on a deep dive that is going to, honestly, completely dismantle that assumption.
It really is. The source material today is incredibly powerful.
It is. We are unpacking an incredibly profound analysis of a piece of music, a song titled, What the Song Means, Heathens Don't Get Homesick.
And I have to tell you, the text we are looking at today goes way, way beyond typical musical critique.
Oh, absolutely. It operates as a masterclass in psychology and the mechanics of survival, and really in completely redefining what the concept of home actually is.
The overarching theme tracing through this whole analysis is a very specific and honestly often painful journey.
Let's unpack that. What is the journey?
Well, we are looking at the transition from relying on external validation, so meaning looking to physical places, groups of people, or formal institutions to tell you who you are.
Right.
And moving from that to developing an unshakable internal compass.
It's essentially the architecture of self-belonging.
That's a perfect way to put it. The song lays out the actual architecture of how you belong to yourself.
So here is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to systematically explore the incredibly vivid metaphors in this source material.
And there are so many good ones.
So many. We're going to look at imagery like heavy wool, stitched iron, broken roads, and the untamed wild.
It sounds like a fantasy novel, but it's pure psychological framework.
It really is. And we're going to use those metaphors to extract a revolutionary way for how you view your own history, the things you've survived, and how you navigate your future.
I can't wait. Where do we start?
Let's jump straight into this central illusion of homesickness. The song starts with this incredibly bold, almost confrontational claim. It just says, Heathens don't get homesick.
Which, at first glance, sounds almost arrogant, doesn't it?
Yeah, that sounds like someone saying, oh, look at us, we're so tough, we don't need anybody, we never hurt.
It reads as highly defiant on the surface, almost carelessly detached.
But it's a misdirection.
It is, because the analysis of the lyrics digs into the second half of that line, which changes the entire context.
The full lyric is, Heathens don't get homesick.
Yeah.
We quit looking back.
Yes. And that single word quit reveals a massive amount of concealed pain right beneath that confident surface.
Because, you don't quit smoking unless you were a smoker.
Exactly. You don't quit a job unless you were showing up every day.
You don't quit something unless you were actively, compulsively engaging in it.
Right. The Heathens in this song did look back. They did replay the past.
They probably spent countless nights staring at the ceiling.
Searching for explanations, questioning their own departures, and wondering if something they left behind could somehow eventually become the home they desperately needed.
So this completely shifts the perspective of the whole song. The source material isn't describing people who are naturally devoid of attachment.
Not at all. They aren't these stoic statues who just walk away from things without feeling a thing. They grieve, they remember, they are profoundly capable of attachment.
So what makes them different then?
What they have done, through sheer repetition and really hard-earned wisdom, is separate a desired feeling from the physical place or person associated with it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Break that down for me.
Well, when you feel homesick, your brain is essentially playing a trick on you.
Huh.
It takes a complex emotional state, like the feeling of being completely safe or being unconditionally understood,
Right.
and it geographically tags it to a location from your past.
So we conflate the geography with the emotion. Okay, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. It's like craving a specific childhood meal, but what you're actually craving is the feeling of someone taking care of you. The food is just the symbol.
That is a brilliant analogy. You think you miss the childhood house, but what you actually miss is the sensation of someone else being in charge of paying the electric bill.
Or someone locking the doors at night. The house is just the symbol for the certainty of being taken care of.
Or, you think you miss a past relationship, but you actually miss the hope you had during that relationship that you were finally chosen.
Oh, that hits hard. You miss the possibility of shelter.
And this raises a highly uncomfortable question that the song forces us to confront.
Which is?
What if the place you are missing never actually consistently provided the safety you are mourning?
Ouch. Yeah. What if you are longing for the feeling that home was supposed to create, rather than the reality of the place itself?
It's the phantom limb of emotional attachment.
You're aching for a version of reality that maybe only existed in small, fleeting moments. Or maybe it only ever existed in your own desperate hopes.
And people fall into this cognitive trap constantly. We tend to edit our memories, stripping away the anxiety or the fear or the suffocation we felt in the past.
We just leave this sanitized highlight reel.
Right. But the Heathens in the song learned that missing something does not mean that leaving it was a mistake.
That is such a crucial distinction.
They realized that returning to that past place would require them to shrink. It would require becoming smaller, quieter, or less recognizable just to fit back into the space they outgrew.
So they stopped treating the emotion of longing as a set of literal instructions.
Yes. Longing just becomes a feeling to be observed, not a command to turn the car around.
But wait, let me push back on that a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Because if you feel that intense pull, if you wake up every day feeling that longing, but you force yourself to stare straight ahead and never look back, isn't that just a fancy form of avoidance?
I can see why you'd say that.
Like, isn't that just white-knuckling your way through emotional numbness?
I see why it looks like avoidance, but if we look closer at the source material, numbness is the exact opposite of what they are doing.
How so?
Well, numbness implies the severing of the nerve, right? It implies you don't feel the pull at all. And avoidance is pretending the past didn't happen.
True.
What the Heathens are doing requires them to be painfully awake. The known past, even when it is demonstrably toxic or painful, often feels neurologically safer than the unknown future simply because it is predictable.
The devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Exactly. Your nervous system prefers a familiar threat to an unfamiliar possibility.
So it craves predictability above actual safety.
Yes. So when the Heathens are moving away from a past that hurt them, their bodies might be moving forward, but their attention, their biological wiring, desperately wants to drag behind and monitor the familiar threat.
Right, because that's how they survived in the past.
So quitting means they are actively overriding their own neurobiology. They consciously teach their minds to face the direction their feet have chosen.
Teaching your mind to face the direction your feet have chosen. That is an incredible way to frame it.
They feel the terror of the unknown future. They acknowledge the pull of the familiar past, and they consciously choose the terror over the regression.
But doing that every single day, waking up, feeling the pull, overriding the nervous system, turning your head forward, that requires an astronomical amount of energy.
Oh, it is exhausting.
There has to be a heavy emotional toll. You don't just rewire your brain casually over breakfast.
The emotional toll is massive, and the song doesn't shy away from it at all, which perfectly bridges into how the lyrics describe the physical weight of this survival.
Yes, the armor imagery.
Exactly. The song uses this incredibly evocative imagery of armor, stating that the Heathens wear the midnight like heavy wool with iron stitched into our veins.
Okay, let's break that down, starting with this concept of midnight. Midnight usually functions in literature as a metaphor for the darkest point, right? The isolation, the fear.
In this specific context, the analysis frames midnight as a representation of everything these individuals carry privately.
Like what?
It's the grief, the uncertainty, the hypervigilance, the memories of the things they had to do to survive. It's the parts of survival that become immensely heavy precisely because they are invisible to the rest of the world.
But pay close attention to the verb the songwriter chose there. The song does not say they are trapped in the midnight. It
Right.
does not say they are lost in it. It says they wear it.
And agency is the key distinction here. To wear something implies agency. You put it on, it surrounds you, it touches your skin, it dictates how you move to some degree, but it is fundamentally separate from your core identity.
You are not the shirt you are wearing.
Exactly. The midnight might be a defining feature of their appearance and their history, but it is not the entirety of who they are. They have domesticated the darkness, in a sense.
And combining midnight with the texture of heavy wool adds such a brilliant layer of psychological nuance.
Let's think about the physical properties of wool. What does it actually do?
Well, it insulates, it protects you from freezing to death,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly heavy, especially if it gets wet. It's itchy. It restricts your range of motion.
Which makes it the perfect metaphor for psychological defenses. The exact same survival mechanisms that kept you alive during a truly dangerous period of your life operate just like thick wool.
Okay, let's ground this for the listener. What does that actually look like in practice? Are we talking about things like emotional detachment?
Emotional detachment, hyper-independence, hyper-vigilance.
Okay, give me an example.
Imagine someone who grew up in a highly volatile household. To survive, they develop the ability to instantly read the mood of a room the second a door opens.
Right, they can sense the tension immediately.
They learn to make themselves invisible. That hypervigilance was their wool. It insulated them from unpredictable abuse. It was a highly effective, totally necessary defense mechanism.
But years later, when they're out of the storm, when they're in a safe relationship or a stable environment, they're still walking around in that heavy winter coat.
And carrying that heavy wool every single day when the sun is shining and there is no threat becomes utterly exhausting.
Because it's heavy and itchy.
The darkness taught them how to endure the darkness. The hypervigilance became familiar, but the song never pretends that this familiarity makes the coat weightless.
They adapted to the night, they survived the freezing temperatures, but they don't lie to themselves and call the night daylight.
They don't pretend the burden isn't heavy.
But here's where the imagery gets even more intense, and I want to challenge the source material a bit here, because this could get misinterpreted.
Okay, let's hear it.
The lyrics then talk about having iron stitched into our veins. Now, iron universally symbolizes structural strength, endurance, the ability to bear incredible weight without buckling.
Right.
But the modifier is that it is stitched in. Doesn't this run the risk of romanticizing suffering?
How do you mean?
Well, there's this pervasive cultural narrative that trauma builds character. We tell people, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Ugh, yes.
And it often feels like a toxic way to justify or brush past the horrific things people endure.
Right.
It sounds like we're telling the listener, you should be grateful for your severe trauma because look at this cool iron strength you got out of it.
It's a very valid concern, and if you look at a lot of pop psychology, it absolutely does lean into that toxic positivity.
So how does this song avoid that?
The source text we are analyzing is wonderfully firm in refuting that exact idea. The song refuses to romanticize the pain. It does not express gratitude for the wounds.
So how does it separate the iron from the gratitude for the wound?
By focusing intensely on the word stitched. Think about the literal reality of a stitch in a medical context.
Okay.
A stitch enters a place in the body that has already been violently opened. The needle pierces the skin again to pull the pieces together. It closes a wound, yes, and it holds the structure together so the person doesn't bleed out. But a stitch fundamentally preserves the evidence that the wound existed in the first place.
Oh, wow. It's a repair, not an upgrade.
A repair born of absolute necessity. The iron reinforces what survived, but it does not erase the fact that massive damage occurred.
The heathens in this song are not strong because they were somehow magical, impenetrable beings that nothing could ever hurt.
Exactly. They aren't Superman deflecting bullets. They are people who took the bullet, bled, and had to spend years painfully extracting the shrapnel and sewing the tissue back together.
That is such a visceral image.
The strength wasn't handed to untouched people as effortless, shiny confidence. It developed through the brutal, repetitive cycle of survival.
Being opened by the world, being repaired, trying to continue, breaking again and rebuilding again.
The iron is in the bloodstream now. It has become structural. But the song is very careful to give the heathens authority over how that pain is carried. The strength is a byproduct of the repair process, not a justification for the injury.
That distinction changes everything. It validates the strength without pardoning whoever caused the wound.
Exactly.
And that thought naturally pushes us to look at how these individuals interact with the outside world. If they had to endure this kind of internal destruction, if they had to stitch themselves back together from the inside out, how do they deal with the systems, the authorities, or the institutions that might have inflicted those wounds in the first place?
The song tackles this dynamic through a deeply evocative contrast between visible and invisible forms of survival, using the imagery of ash right beside a pulse beneath mountain stone.
Okay, let's start with the ash. Ash is the ultimate evidence of destruction. You walk into a forest, you see ash, and you instantly know a fire ripped through here.
It's undeniable.
Right. You know that whatever existed before has been irrevocably changed by force.
Ash commands attention. When trauma or survival is visible, like when someone has literal physical scars, or when a community struggle is documented on the evening news, society tends to recognize it, even if imperfectly.
People can point to the ash and say something devastating happened there.
But the lyrics place that visible ash directly next to the pulse beneath mountain stone.
And a pulse beneath mountain stone is entirely hidden. I mean, if you look at a mountain, it appears silent, ancient, cold, and completely immovable.
You would never assume there is a beating heart buried under tons of granite.
Never. We constantly make this mistake in how we view each other. We look at someone who appears stoic, someone who goes to work every day, pays their bills, and doesn't openly weep, and we assume that because we don't see visible ash, there was no fire.
We mistake stillness for emptiness. We assume that if someone isn't visibly struggling, they must be completely whole.
Or we assume that if they aren't visibly overcoming and triumphing in this loud, cinematic way, they aren't surviving at all.
But the hidden pulse insists that quiet life is still life. Invisible endurance is still endurance. Sometimes, survival doesn't look like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Sometimes it looks like simply maintaining a faint heartbeat under the crushing weight of a mountain until the pressure eventually shifts.
And the Heathens contain both realities.
They do.
So they have this profound internal reality, both the visible scars and the hidden pulse. And because they know exactly what it costs to survive, they become fiercely protective of their identity.
Which is where the song pivots.
Right, it pivots to an active, aggressive rejection of external ownership. The lyrics state, no flags, no crowns, no borrowed names, and no ink or parchment claimed our birth.
Let's synthesize what those specific symbols represent in the context of authority. A flag is a territorial marker, right? It declares where someone is expected to belong and whose borders they must defend.
And a crown.
A crown establishes a rigid hierarchy of value, dictating who has the divine right to command and who is expected to obey.
And what about borrowed names? That feels much more intimate than a flag or a crown.
A borrowed name is any identity or label assigned to you before you had the agency to choose it for yourself.
Like what?
It could be a family expectation, like, you're a Smith, we are doctors, we don't talk about our feelings.
Right, or it could be a societal label based on your gender, your class, or your geography.
Or it could be an identity handed to you by someone who only understands one tiny, usually negative fragment of your life.
Oh, people love to give you a borrowed name based on your worst mistake. They box you in. They decide you are the broken one or the failure.
Or on the flip side, the useful one who never complains.
Yeah, you're wearing a name tag somebody else wrote out for you.
Exactly. And the ink and parchment represent the formalization of those labels. It's the contracts, the inherited debts, the legalistic official versions of your identity.
It's the systems that attempt to categorize human beings and determine who belongs to whom.
But the song aggressively insists that the Heathens' existence, their pulse beneath the stone, predated any of that paperwork.
A human being is not born as a blank bureaucratic document waiting for a king or a CEO or a parent to stamp it and give it value.
The authority to exist doesn't come from the kingdom. And that realization profoundly changes how the Heathens interact with the concept of power.
This brings up a massive difference that I think is crucial for anyone listening right now. We often confuse rebellion with liberation.
Yes, we do.
But they are completely different psychological states. If the Heathens were just rebellious, they would be plotting to storm the castle, kill the king, and steal the crown for themselves.
And if they did that, they would just be replacing the management. The system itself would remain entirely intact.
Exactly. Okay, so rebellion is basically just arguing with your landlord about the rules of the building. You're banging on the pipes, you're refusing to pay rent, you're spray painting the hallways, but you are still living in their building.
You're still there.
You are still fighting over their terms, letting their walls define your reality. Liberation is waking up one morning and realizing you don't even have to live in that building anymore. The border of their property, was never the edge of the actual world.
That analogy of the landlord perfectly captures the danger of conquest that the song avoids. If the heathens conquered the wall would still determine where the important battle occurred.
Right.
If they seized the crown would remain the center of meaning. They would just be the ones wearing it, terrified of the next rebel who comes along to take it.
They'd become the exact thing that wounded them.
Liberation, as framed in this source material, no longer needs the authority to provide the terms of existence. True freedom isn't finally winning admission into a country club that excluded you for 20 years.
It's realizing the country club never mattered.
True freedom is recognizing that the country club never had the right to define the whole world in the first place and just walking away into the forest.
They refused to let the pressure that bent them become their permanent shape. But this is where the rubber meets the road, and honestly where it gets terrifying.
It is terrifying.
Once you walk out of the building, once you abandon the kingdom's official maps, tear up the ink and parchment and say, I'm not playing by these rules anymore, you are stepping out into the absolute void, the wild.
Which requires a whole new set of skills.
Right. How do you navigate when you have rejected all the standard societal directions for how a life is supposed to go?
You have to invent a completely different cartography. You have to build a new way of mapping your life based on survival rather than societal expectation.
And the chorus of the song reveals the tools they use for this. The lyrics say, every scar's a northern star, every broken road's our map.
They also mention navigating by a crooked moon rather than aiming for a straight, safe horizon.
Let's talk about this. Every scar's a northern star. We just spent a lot of time talking about how the song does not romanticize pain. We established that the iron is a necessary repair, not a badge of honor. So how does a scar, the literal evidence of damage, become a guiding star without contradicting that? How do you use trauma as a map without letting it trap you?
By understanding the function of a northern star. Think about ancient navigation. A sailor looks up at the northern star to establish orientation. It tells them where north is.
Right.
But the star does not sail the ship. The star does not decide the destination. The star does not carry the cargo. It simply provides a fixed point of information so the sailor can figure out where they are in relation to danger or safety.
It's just a reference point.
That is precisely what scars become in this psychological framework. They transition from being open, bleeding wounds to being functional tools of orientation.
So they give you information.
A scar tells you where damage occurred, tells you what you survived, and most importantly, it tells you what conditions, behaviors, or red flags you should no longer accept in your life. It shows you what to recognize sooner the next time you encounter it.
The scar is just data. It's information. It says, hey, last time we touched a stove that looked exactly like this, it burned us. Let's walk around this one.
It is guidance, not identity. That is the razor-thin line that protects the heathens from building a new prison out of their own survival.
Okay, expand on that. Guidance, not identity.
If your scar becomes your entire identity, if you introduce yourself to the world entirely through the lens of what was done to you, then the wound still rules you. It still dictates your daily shape.
You're just living inside the wound.
But if it is just a star in the sky, it provides crucial information without demanding your worship or your total submission.
I love that. But if you're listening to this, you're probably wondering, how do I actually do this in the real world? How do you stop treating your past mistakes, your bad decisions, or the things done to you as a life sentence?
Well, the song says every broken road's our map.
But a broken road isn't a map. By definition, a map is supposed to show you a clean, unbroken route from point A to point B.
A standard map, yes. A perfect road on a standard map follows somebody else's planned, engineered route. It tells you exactly where to enter the highway, where you are permitted to turn, and where society expects you to end up by age 30, 40, or 50.
But a broken road completely obliterates that passive travel. When the road shatters or washes out or hits a dead end, you can't just put the car on cruise control anymore.
No, it forces participation in your own life. You have to read the terrain. You have to judge for yourself what ground remains stable enough to hold your weight.
And you have to recognize when a path has simply vanished and it's time to turn around. Dead ends and detours are not failures in this framework. They contain crucial data.
They show you how you adapted when the original expected route completely fell apart. The map isn't a plan for the future. It's a record of your capacity for adaptation.
It proves that movement continued after the official instructions became useless. You didn't die when the road ended, you just went off-road.
And that ties directly into their reliance on the crooked moon.
Right, the safe horizon versus the crooked moon.
A safe horizon is straight, Brightly lit and highly visible. It's the guaranteed path. But reaching that safe, approved horizon might demand deep self-betrayal. It might require you to wear a borrowed name forever.
And the crooked moon.
The crooked moon offers imperfect, partial, shifting light. It might only give you enough illumination to see 3 feet in front of your face.
Which is terrifying.
It is terrifying because you cannot see the whole staircase, to borrow a familiar phrase. But the song argues that navigating by incomplete guidance, combined with a deep well of self-trust, is infinitely better than having perfect, brightly lit instructions that are leading you toward a life that isn't actually yours.
It's better to stumble in the dark toward your own truth than sprint in the daylight toward a lie.
Absolutely.
But walking this broken road, constantly reading the unstable ground, navigating by partial light, let's be real, that is utterly exhausting.
Oh, it drains you.
You can't just march through the wilderness forever. Even heathens have to stop. They have to rest. But how do you find shelter without accidentally trapping yourself again? How do you put down roots without the new house becoming just another kingdom with a new landlord?
This is where the source material gets incredibly perceptive about human nature. It introduces a brilliant exploration of the tension between comfort and stagnation in the second verse.
Let's hear it.
The lyrics set up this contrast. Quiet houses rust in place, but wandering bones refuse to fold.
Quiet houses rust in place. Let's look at that word rust. Rust is a very specific type of decay. It's not a violent earthquake that shatters the foundation. It's not a sudden fire that burns it to the ground.
Rust is molecular. It is gradual, silent, and incredibly slow. And that is exactly what makes it so profoundly dangerous to a person's spirit.
Because you don't notice it happening.
The structure of the house doesn't collapse in one obvious, dramatic event that forces you to leave. Instead, it deteriorates invisibly through stillness and moisture.
A house can look incredibly respectable from the outside. The lawn is mowed, the paint is fresh, everything looks perfectly fine to the neighbors. But internally, the structural integrity is quietly flaking away.
Comfort is a tricky thing. It can start costing you your identity long before the loss is easy to see. A quiet house might offer shelter from the rain, but if the cost of that shelter is absolute stillness...
Right, if you are not allowed to make noise.
If you are not allowed to change, if you have to shrink yourself to avoid disturbing the peace, then that house is rusting you in place.
And, opposed to the rusting house, the lyrics give us wandering bones refuse to fold. Wandering isn't framed here as a fun weekend hobby or a lack of commitment. It's structural. It's in their literal bones.
And to fold means to compress yourself. Think about folding a large map to fit into a tiny glove compartment.
Yeah, you have to crease it, bend it, and hide most of its surface area just to make it fit the container.
The heathens refuse to fold themselves into a respectable, predictable, but ultimately suffocating space. You might physically fit inside that quiet house, but mere fitting is not the same thing as belonging.
Fitting in requires you to change your shape to match the container. Belonging requires the container to accept your actual shape. The song is drawing a hard line between shelter and confinement.
A house stops being a home the exact moment that remaining inside it requires you to disappear.
And this pairs with another powerful contrast in the same verse. The heathens are faced with a choice between living firelight and the promise of forever.
Now, in our culture, forever is always sold to us as the ultimate, unquestionable goal, the happily ever after.
The permanent ironclad guarantee. We want the 30-year mortgage, the permanent contract, the relationship that never ends. Why would the heathens reject forever?
Because permanence is not a synonym for aliveness. Yes, something can last a long time because it is genuinely healthy and continually nourished.
Yeah.
But something can also last forever simply because everyone involved is too terrified to admit that it died 10 years ago.
Ouch. Yeah.
A promise of forever can easily become a socially sanctioned way to avoid telling the truth about the present moment. It becomes the sunk cost fallacy.
We've been here this long, we promised forever, so we have to stay, even though the house is rusting and we are miserable.
The promise itself becomes a cold stone monument.
It's prioritizing the contract over the human beings inside the contract.
Right.
So what is the alternative they choose?
They choose living firelight. Think about what a fire requires. It provides intense, immediate heat right now. It illuminates exactly what is close enough to see right now.
But a fire is alive. It moves, it shifts with the wind, it consumes fuel, and it's incredibly vulnerable. If you start paying attention to it, you stop feeding it, it will go out.
Its vulnerability is the exact proof that it is alive. A cold stone monument requires no maintenance, but it gives no heat. A fire requires constant participation.
They are choosing a living, high-maintenance truth over a lifeless, guaranteed permanence.
Yeah.
But I need to play devil's advocate here, because this could easily be misinterpreted. Is the song advocating for total transience? Are we saying you should never commit to a partner, never sign a lease, never settle down, just constantly wander the earth and abandon everything the second it feels a little too quiet or requires a little compromise?
The analysis is very careful to avoid that extreme. The song is not launching an attack on peace, and it is not attacking the concept of commitment.
Okay, good. So what is it attacking?
What it is attacking is a very specific type of peace. Peace purchased through self-disappearance. The Heathens are perfectly capable of sharing fire. They can share shelter.
But they completely reject any connection that is fundamentally built on possession or control. They will not abandon their internal compass just to keep a forever promise technically unbroken.
It sounds to me like the psychological difference between a fence and a wall.
Oh, I like that. The lyrics mention that no fence has changed our course.
Right. If you build a 20-foot concrete wall across my path, it physically blocks me. I have to stop where I have to find a ladder. The wall enforces its will on me through physics.
But a fence, a 3-foot wooden fence, doesn't physically stop a human being.
A fence works entirely by suggestion. It relies on your psychological obedience.
Exactly. It relies on your fear of what the neighbors will think if you step over it. It relies on your fear of disappointing the person who built it.
It relies on your ingrained belief that you should just stay in your assigned grassy rectangle and not cause trouble.
A fence only works if you agree to pretend it's a wall.
That is a phenomenal way to understand it. Fences represent the smaller, invisible social restrictions that are highly capable of redirecting the entire trajectory of a life.
Shame is a fence.
Obligation is a fence. The desperate need to be understood by people who refuse to hear you is a massive fence. The Heathens see the fence. They acknowledge it is there, but they refuse to grant it final authority over the direction their feet are walking.
And how do they know when a fence is just a fence? How do they know when it's time to step over it?
The song mentions navigating this through what it calls the oldest silence.
The oldest silence. What does that mean?
The oldest silence refers to primal instinct. It is the bodily tension and the deep pre-verbal truth that exists long before language ever catches up.
It's that heavy atmosphere in a room, the awareness that something fundamental has shifted or broken long before anyone has the courage to admit it aloud.
It's the gut feeling, when someone's actions are screaming one thing but their words are saying another.
Human beings are incredibly adept at ignoring the oldest silence. Because we want official confirmation, we wait for a verbal confession.
We think, well, they haven't explicitly said they don't care about me anymore, so I must just be imagining things.
The Heathens don't wait for the paperwork.
Yeah.
They don't need a formal declaration to trust what the patterns, the avoidance, and the repeated absences are already telling their nervous system.
They trust the silence before it is spoken.
They trust their own perception of reality. But here is the consequence of that trust. By refusing to fold into these rusting, quiet houses, by ignoring the invisible fences of societal expectation, and by trusting the oldest silence, the Heathens are inevitably forced out of the village.
Yes. They are forced out into the elements.
Which brings us to the most untamed, uncontrolled environment in the entire source material. The wild.
The wild serves as the ultimate crucible in this song. The lyric says, "The wild remembers every step and never asks the source."
Here we see the concept of belonging completely and utterly stripped of any human authorization.
Think about how exhausting human systems are. If you want to belong to a kingdom, a country club, a corporation, or even a family dynamic, they always demand credentials.
They want your resume. They want to know your family name, your title, your net worth, or they want a long, groveling explanation of your history.
They want to review your paperwork before they decide if your presence actually holds any value.
But the wild is indifferent to your resume. The wild asks for absolutely none of that bureaucratic nonsense.
The wild simply records the literal physical pressure of your foot on the earth. You do not need a king's permission to arrive in the forest. You take a step, and the grass bends. The dust shifts.
The ground changes shape because you stood there. A path begins to form simply because you walked it.
Belonging is created through honest presence alone. It is not something granted to you by a judge. It is a physical reality of your existence.
And that is a profoundly liberating concept, especially for anyone who feels unseen by the human systems around them.
The analysis describes this dynamic in the wild as the quietest and most complete expression of freedom. Your existence leaves a consequence, even if there is absolutely no audience to applaud it.
If you're listening to this and you feel like your daily efforts go completely unnoticed, if you feel like you are screaming into a void because you don't have the fancy title or the massive social media following or the vocal validation from your family, this reframes everything.
It really does.
The wild doesn't need to post your achievements on a billboard for them to be real. The fact that you woke up, that you existed, that you moved through the world and changed the ground beneath you, that consequence is enough.
You matter because you have mass and take up space, not because someone stamped your passport.
And crucially, the Heathens are not trying to become the new kings of the wild. They state, "We don't leave tracks for anyone to follow. We leave them so the earth remembers."
Impact is not instruction. They aren't trying to build a cult following.
They reject the idea of having followers just as fiercely as they rejected the kingdom's rulers.
If they walked out into the wild and immediately demanded that other people copy their exact path, they would just be creating another set of borrowed names and invisible fences for someone else to suffer under.
They didn't want to wear a crown, and they don't want the burden of disciples. Their validation is entirely self-contained within the physical reality of their own existence.
They don't need you to validate their map, and they aren't going to force you to walk their map.
Which leads us to the final, and frankly most powerful, transformation in the entire analysis. All of this moving, tracking, surviving the midnight, bleeding to get the iron stitched in, and reading the broken roads. It culminates in a massive internal shift.
Because eventually they don't just follow the map anymore.
In the final chorus, the imagery undergoes a profound evolution. The Heathens have completely absorbed the journey.
They transition from relying on external evidence, looking at the literal scars on their skin, looking up at the stars in the sky, reading the broken dirt roads on the ground, to internalizing all of that information.
They don't just carry a map, they become the map.
We became the map. Let's explore what that actually means for a person's psychology. Because becoming the map doesn't mean they suddenly achieved enlightenment, right?
It doesn't mean they now possess absolute godlike certainty about what's going to happen tomorrow.
Not at all. Becoming the map means they no longer believe that certainty must come from an outside authority. The knowledge of how to read unstable ground, the muscle memory of how to survive the midnight, the sharp instinct of how to recognize the invisible rust in a quiet house. All of that knowledge now lives permanently inside them as a reliable internal compass.
They have accrued enough self-knowledge, through trial and error, to participate fully in choosing their own direction.
They trust themselves to handle the unknown. And that leads to the climactic line that gives the song its title and redefines the entire concept we started with. Home is the blood inside our veins.
Think about the implications of that. If home is a physical place, like a house or a hometown, then the very moment you drive past the city limits, you are homeless, you are adrift.
And if home is a specific person, if you have outsourced your entire sense of safety and identity to a partner or a parent, then the moment that person leaves or changes or passes away, you are entirely destroyed.
You are left without a foundation.
But if home is your own blood, it travels wherever your physical body travels.
It is the ultimate portable sanctuary.
If home is the blood, then that hollow emptiness you feel after leaving a place or a person isn't necessarily proof that you made a tragic mistake. We often interpret the pain of departure as a signal to turn back.
But if your blood is your home, that emptiness is just the temporary, drafty space where a new iteration of your identity is forming. It's the space created because the old map has ended, and the new one hasn't been drawn yet.
It's the blank edge of the map where it says, "Here be dragons. You aren't lost, you're just charting new territory."
And the Heathens make a final oath as they walk into this new territory. Keep the fire, keep the road.
Notice that the oath is not reach the destination as fast as possible. It's not about speed, and it's not about conquering the wilderness. It's about maintaining the elements of survival.
Keep the fire means protecting what makes you vital and alive. Your curiosity, your righteous anger, your passion, your warmth. You have to tend to your internal fire so the heavy wool of the midnight doesn't freeze you.
And keep the road means protecting the belief that another step exists. It means not surrendering the possibility of forward motion. Resting by the fire is a necessary part of the journey, as long as it's a conscious rest and not a resting in place.
Surviving another terrible night is, in itself, movement. Refusing to return to a life that requires you to fold yourself in half is forward movement, even if you are standing completely physically still.
I want to synthesize all this by looking at the incredible vulnerability hiding right beneath all this tough language.
Let's do it.
When we started, the phrase "heathens don't get homesick" sounded so incredibly hardened, it sounded like armor. But when you truly unpack it, it is protecting a devastatingly human admission.
It protects the admission that these individuals wanted to belong so badly, they were so desperate for a quiet house and a safe forever, that they once mistook very bad places for home.
That is the beautiful beating heart of this entire analysis. The song never ever claims that nothing hurts. It doesn't claim that the heathens are immune to longing.
It simply establishes that pain does not get to become the reigning authority over your life. Missing something deeply does not automatically create an obligation to return to it and let it wound you again.
And they haven't given up on human connection either. That's vital to point out. The word "we" is used consistently throughout the song.
We wear the midnight, we quit looking back, our veins. They aren't isolated hermits dying alone in a cave.
They are deeply connected, they can walk beside others, they can share the fire for immediate warmth, and they can look at the same crooked moon for distant direction together.
But this internalized map allows two people to walk beside each other by absolute choice, without requiring one person to become the other person's entire suffocating home. They have entirely rejected connection built on possession, neediness, or control.
They bring their own home to the relationship rather than demanding the relationship build a house for them.
So, to bring this all together, we have gone on a massive, profound journey today. We started by questioning the very nature of homesickness, realizing that our brains often trick us into mistaking familiar, predictable pain for home.
We explored the exhausting discipline of quitting looking back and how we learn to wear our survival mechanisms, our hypervigilance, our heavy wool, without letting the midnight own our identity.
We examined the difference between the visible ash that society recognizes and the hidden pulse of endurance beneath the mountain stone. We unpacked why tearing up the ink and parchment of borrowed names is the only way to move from mere rebellion to true liberation.
We talked about arguing with landlords versus stepping off the property entirely.
We learned how to strip the emotional weight from our scars and turn them into northern stars, functional data points for navigating the future rather than life sentences echoing from the past.
We explored the subtle, terrifying danger of rusting in quiet houses and why a vulnerable, living firelight is always better than a cold, dead promise of forever.
And finally, we saw how the ultimate expression of freedom is stepping into a wild that doesn't ask for your credentials, internalizing all those lessons, and making your own blood your unshakable home.
It is a radical reimagining of how we relate to our own history. It demands intense, ongoing critical thinking about the invisible fences we allow to dictate the boundaries of our lives.
And that brings me to a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over as you go about the rest of your day, or as you lay in bed tonight. Think about the things you are longing for. Think about the places or the people you feel homesick for.
Let yourself feel it.
If home is no longer a physical building you left behind, if it's no longer a job title you lost, or a relationship that ended, if home is instead the core part of yourself that you absolutely refuse to abandon or fold, how does that radically change the way you step into your life tomorrow morning?
What invisible fence have you been obeying, stopping at the edge of the grass, just because it was suggested to you by someone who didn't understand your pulse?
And what happens when you finally decide to step over it, knowing that the wild remembers your steps, whether you have someone's official permission to take them or not? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep the fire and keep the road.